the parish church of St. Pierre and St. Paul. Although the exact origin of Morhang is still unknown, the fact remains that it was not until the 13th century that the village developed with the arrival of the Counts of Salm, who built a castle and surrounded the city with a rampart. It is therefore clear that a church existed in Morhang from that moment on. The small town of Morhang and the primitive church were destroyed by fire in 1401, on the 2nd of July, the Feast of the Visitation. The inhabitants therefore vowed to hold a procession every year in honor of the Virgin on the day of the feast, in order to protect the city. The construction of a new place of worship is necessary. In Morhang, the right of patronage of the church belonged to the abbess of the Benedictine nuns of Grouthal, who received 2/3 of the tithes. The abbess thus participated in the founding of the church and drew up a lease agreement between his abbey, the prior of the Benedictines of Innsmouth, and other persons of the Diocese of Trier in March 1421. Relatively modest in size, the building has a nave measuring 22.70 meters by 15.50 meters and 9.25 meters by 6.60 meters for the choir. The nave, which has 5 bays with aisles, has no transept. The vaults reach a height of 9.60 meters. The bell tower is separated from the nave and is located away from the latter north side. The entrance of the faithful is also from the north. The chapel of the Lords, to the right of the choir, has a door allowing access reserved for the counts and their relatives. In addition to the main altar in the choir, 8 other altars dedicated to the veneration of the saints adorn the aisles. 100 years have passed since the fire of 1401, and the procession in honor of the Virgin has fallen into oblivion. In the year 1501, the city was struck by lightning that caused a new fire. This time, the church is spared, with the exception of the bell tower. The protection of the city is attributed to the presence of the statue of the Virgin, called Notre Dame du Feu. The procession will resume and continue to this day. The Counts of Salm, who worked hard to restore the village, participated in the reconstruction of the bell tower that received the Hosanna bell, 1501, supposed to ward off thunderstorms. The church was then maintained more or less regularly until the middle of the 18th century, but without making any significant changes. In 1752, to cope with the increase in population, it was planned to enlarge the church by 2 bays on the west side. A new bell tower is erected in the axis of the nave, above the first span, and is surmounted by a bulb roof. The facade, rather sober, receives a central portal that replaces the old entrance door on the north side and now condemned. This restoration is an opportunity to install a new high altar in rock style and to renovate the sacristy located on the left of the choir. During the Revolutionary period, the church suffered very little damage. Worship was suspended, liturgical vestments, ornaments, sacred vessels were secured outside. The church was not desecrated and cults could resume in 1801. The events of 1870 to 1871 led to the annexation of the Moselle to the German Empire and brought little change, except to undertake remediation work to combat the dampness of the building. But a major restoration is needed. In 1889, before the scheduled work began, a vault of the nave collapsed, smashing benches and floor. The major restoration was undertaken from 1889 to 1911 under the pastorate of Abbé Kramer, and entrusted to the curator of historical monuments Paul Tourneau. He had the church classified in 1889. Paul Tourneau will make many modifications to the building, both exterior and interior, which will give us the image of the church that is, except for a few details, what it is today. The church is restored and decorated in neo-Gothic style. It was at this time that the Grand Duke of Baden donated the monumental carved stone preaching pulpit. The Great War left only superficial wounds to the parish church, and the building suffered little damage until the Second World War. This conflict saw the confiscation of the bells by the occupier in 1943, with the exception of the historic Hosanna bell, which remained in place. New bells were consecrated in 1949. The contemporary period is marked by a new restoration carried out in the 1960s. The new, modern, stained glass windows were installed in 1961. The only old stained glass windows to be preserved are that of the Nativity, first bay on the left, and those of the choir.